Good evening, and welcome to our community conversation concerning mental health. I am Monique Jackson, Anne Arundel County Public Schools Deputy Superintendent for Student and School Support. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our Superintendent, Dr. George Arlotto.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson, and thank you to our panelists for taking the time to be with us this evening and sharing your passion and expertise on mental and behavioral health in support of our students and families. There is no question that we've all endured a challenging year. While the mental health of our students, staff, and families is always of prime importance, COVID has changed our routines and isolated us from important and needed relationships. Our current and ongoing circumstance has exacerbated underlying issues for many and built new challenges for others. I recently read an article about mental health in schools and learned the following. 1 in 5 children in the US show signs or symptoms of mental health disorder in a given year. The same issues many adults deal with: depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Unfortunately, nearly 80% of those children in need will not get access to the critical services. These data are certainly alarming. I'm proud of the work done by our Mental Health Task Force, a joint initiative with our county government and supported by a wide array of stakeholders and experts in the field. As stated by the National Association of School Psychologists, meeting the full continuum of student needs is dependent on collaboration between schools and community mental health providers. So tonight's part of the ongoing and much needed conversation, and recognizing that we all have a role to play, and that certainly begins with families. I'm very appreciative of all of our parents, guardians, and caregivers of our students that have joined us this evening and are working to better understand the needs of their children. Likewise, teachers, administrators, counselors, social workers, school psychologists, and others play an important role in recognizing signs and symptoms of need and directing students and families to appropriate supports, of which there are many in our county. So thank you again to our panelists, and thank you all for your participation in tonight's conversation on mental health. Knowing the supports that exist within AACPS and throughout our county, and working toward eliminating the stigma around mental health is important to our supporting our students. Thank you for being part of the conversation. And I'll turn it back over now to Mrs. Jackson.
Thank you so much, Dr. Arlotto. And again, thank you to all of you who are viewing this evening, and thank you to our distinguished panel. I will be introducing our panel members this evening and affording them the opportunity of 1 to 2 minutes to give a statement about their role related to mental health within Anne Arundel County or Anne Arundel County Public Schools. First, we have one of our star students, Mr. Justin Pileska. Justin is a junior at Meade High School. He participates in the Homeland Security Signature Program and is an active student leader in the county and state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson. I totally appreciate the introduction. Hi, public. Hi, Anne Arundel County Public Schools. It is my honor to serve as Meade High School's representative on the AACPS Teen Mental Health Advisory, and I also serve on the state level Maryland Center for School Safety Focus Group to provide insight onto how we can help our students with mental health issues and how we can solve the ongoing issue of much needed resources in our school systems involving mental health.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Ms. Mizetta Wilson. She is the Director of the Community of Hope, which is part of the Anne Arundel County Partnership for Children, Youth, and Families. Her agency is located in the Brooklyn Park area.
Hi. Hello, my name is Mizetta Wilson. I am the Community of Hope Director for Brooklyn Park. And so my agency, the Partnership for Anne Arundel County Partnership for Children and Families, what we do is we connect community, you guys, to resources. We connect resources to each other, and we try to make sure that everybody's doing our very best and working together to support the community. And so I do most of my work in Brooklyn Park, but I do work in other parts of the county. And hi, hopefully I can give you some information that's useful for you, and hopefully you guys can get some support that you need.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mr. Sergio Polanco. He is the Multicultural Affairs Officer in the Office of the County Executive.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. Thank you, everyone, for the invite. As you mentioned, I'm the Multicultural Outreach Officer for the Anne Arundel County. One of my main goals is try to connect communities, especially those with English as mother tongue language, and helping them in facing day by day of these challenges that all families since the pandemic was start a year ago. And day by day is critical for us to connect our communities and share all the resources that we have available for them, even in English and Spanish and some other languages. And I'm proud to work with all of these, many of these agencies around here today, especially the ACPS, that this is a main connection to our families, to the schools. And I'm here to support all one of you. And I'd like to learn also with what other resources that we can offer to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan Vogelin is the Director of Student Services for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. He oversees the work of the counselors, psychologists, social workers, and pupil personnel workers.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Yes, I've been in this position for 4 years. I'm a previous elementary school counselor, pupil personnel worker, and assistant principal and principal. And what I do now is support all things school mental health. I'm on the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency's board, as well as the partnership with Children, Youth, and Family. And I look forward to just providing information so we can better support and connect families and students to mental health resources.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Jen Corbin and Lieutenant Steve Thomas. Ms. Jen Corbin is the Director of the Crisis Response for Anne Arundel County. She and her team respond to a variety of crisis situations in the county. And Lieutenant Thomas is the coordinator of the County Crisis Response Unit and works closely with the school system and other agencies.
So, good evening. Jen is going to be here momentarily, but I think I can speak for both of us because it's important to recognize the relationship that the police department has, not just with the school system, but with crisis response. And with our CIT unit, we fully integrated police officers into crisis response so that we have a behavioral health response, not a traditional law enforcement response, if you want to put it that way, where we respond out to help anyone that's in crisis in any situation. And again, it's that complete integration of the police department into the crisis system that makes it work. And then again, the communication between us and the school system to have a full wraparound service for the children.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Catherine Gray. She is the Deputy Director of the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency.
Good evening, and thank you, Ms. Jackson. I'm Catherine Gray. I'm with the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency, and we are responsible for the local management and oversight of our public behavioral health system. We also help provide families with those connections to behavioral health resources, and we serve across the lifespan. So our early childhood, our children, youth, and young adults, as well as our adults and older adults, we have them all.
Thank you. And last, but certainly not least, we have Ms. Adrienne Michler. She's the Executive Director of the Anne Arundel County Mental Health Agency. Adrienne was the co-chair, along with Mr. Ryan Vogelin, of the Mental Health Task Force.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight. And I think, as Catherine said, our goal is to make sure that we have a robust continuum of care for our residents so that everyone has access to the health care they need. And also working with all the other county departments and agencies to make sure that our residents and our students are supported in whatever area they need, not just mental health, but social supports, transportation. I mean, we work with all the county departments. So it's really a pleasure to be here, and hope we can get you some really nice information tonight that will help you out.
Thank you all so much. And I see that Ms. Corbin has joined us. Good evening, Ms. Corbin. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this evening out of your busy schedule.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm late.
No, it's okay. We really appreciate it. We know that you continue to support not only Anne Arundel County Public Schools, but all of the citizens of Anne Arundel County. And we appreciate you taking your time to be here this evening, along with the rest of our distinguished panel. We ask the public and stakeholders to submit questions for this evening's town hall. I will go through a few of those as our time does not afford us the opportunity to go through all of them. I have put them in groups so that we can make sure that we address many different subjects and so that we can get the full expertise of our panel. In an effort to give equity of voice and address each question that has been submitted, for each question, we've identified 2 or 3 panelists to initially respond. And if time permits, we will then open the discussion to the other panelists. Our first question is for Mr. Pileska and then Ms. Gray. How can students, parents, and teachers be supportive and empathetic towards students who are struggling with mental health challenges?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much to whoever asked that question. It's a question that we more than needed to hear, and I feel like it definitely needs to be addressed somewhere, somehow. First and foremost, teachers can most importantly just support their students by realizing that we are not operating under normal circumstances. Anything but this is normal, and we need to make sure that we emphasize that to our students by being more flexible, realizing that students are going to be able to complete more than like 100 assigned assignments. It's just not feasible. It's, as I like to call it, this pandemic is a war we're currently fighting, and students are the offensive, or the defensive, and the pandemic is the offensive. So right now we're playing defense trying to go into offense, if that makes sense as the relevant metaphor.
So I think one of the things we need to consider is our strongest predictor of resilience, and that's that ability to adapt to adversity, is that presence of a caring and supportive relationship. So how can you, either teachers or parents, be that supportive relationship? The biggest one is just be patient. Everybody handles stress differently. We all bring our own risks and our own strengths to every situation that we're in. Our strengths and our risks are all unique. We really do want people to grow and to heal. We understand this isn't easy for everyone. Check in with folks frequently. This isn't a one and done conversation. These are ongoing conversations that we should be having with people. We also need to make sure that when someone does acknowledge that they need help, or they're really not doing well, or really starting to struggle more than normal, we're going to provide some resources today that you can share with them.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gray. And that's a perfect segue into, I wanted to open up with the first question so that we could sort of set the tone. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Vogelin and Ms. Michler to present an overview of some of the resources that we have in Anne Arundel County for both our students and our families.
Thank you. So I will, I'm going to present some of the mental health supports from the school perspective, and then Ms. Michler and Ms. Gray will present from the community mental health supports perspective. I just want to give an overview of school mental health as it exists in Anne Arundel County Public Schools and what the supports are that are available to students. Student Services is comprised of 4 departments. We have our Office of Psychological Services, which houses our school psychologists. We have about 80 school psychologists in our county. We also have our Office of School Counseling, which houses our school counselors. We have about more than 250 school counselors in our school system. Our Office of Pupil Personnel is where our pupil personnel workers work, and we have about 35 pupil personnel workers in the county. And then we have our Office of School Social Work, and we have about 30 school social workers in the county. We also have a partnership with an important partnership that we call Expanded School-Based Mental Health. And this is a partnership with 5 clinical community counseling agencies that we have contracts with. And they are Villa Maria Children's Guild, Army Behavioral Health, Thrive Behavioral Health, and Innovative Therapeutic Services. And they have therapists within about 100 of our schools. And they are, each agency has a different part of the county. And these therapists provide more intensive counseling supports than our student services staff would. They do it on a weekly basis, and they provide it in the school buildings when we are in school buildings. Right now, they've been doing telemental health. And it reduces barriers when it comes to counseling and therapy that some families might have transportation issues or don't have, their schedule doesn't allow for evening or weekend appointments. This overcomes some of those barriers. We also have an important partnership with our with the health department, in which we have school nurses in every building, and school nurses also play a more of a secondary role when it comes to mental health, and we do a lot of consultation with our school nurses. These are just some of the school supports that we have around student mental health. I mentioned our school-based student services staff. They are really, they play an integral role in terms of supporting students in the school building with mental health. They do individual counseling, group counseling. They do classroom counseling lessons. They provide, they have school-wide programs and initiatives around wellness and mental health. They really support our students when it comes to social, emotional, academic, and career college support. We have our expanded school-based mental health program that I just described. We also have, we've implemented student wellness blocks in all levels, elementary, middle, and high school, which lessons are introduced on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, around social emotional learning and just wellness strategies and how to engage in discussions around your mental health and wellness. We also have a teen mental health advisories. We have a representative from each high school who meets regularly and discusses mental health issues that are going on in their schools and helps advise us on the best way to support mental health in the schools. We also have amazing partnerships with the community resources. A few of those examples are our crisis response system, the Anne Arundel Mental Health Agency, Partnership for Children, Family, and Youth, and many other community resources that allow us to refer families and students to outside mental health and community supports.
Hi. This slide shows the public-private partnership that the Mental Health Agency enjoys with our county government. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we function as the mental health authority for the county, so we're accountable to all of our residents. With our Department of Health partners, we formed the local Behavioral Health Authority. Together, we're responsible for the overall continuum of care for behavioral health in Anne Arundel County. And as you can see from the picture, our crisis response system, of which we are very proud and is a model not only for the state but nationally, is part of our agency. And they have a very important role in our continuum, serving, among others, as that no wrong door.
When we talk about our mental health system in the state of Maryland, we're really talking about 2 distinct types of system. There's a system for individuals with private insurance, and there's a system for individuals with public insurance. Public insurance is folks that have Medicaid. We are very fortunate in Maryland to have a very robust public system. Now, with each private insurance company, there's a cadre of services that are just part of the expectation. If you are providing services here in Maryland, you need to provide these services, but each insurance company may or may not have additional services that they provide. So outpatient services, that's your therapy and your medication management if you need medication. Your intensive outpatient services can be used as a diversion from an inpatient psychiatric hospital or as a step down if somebody still needs those ongoing types of supports. And again, in our private system, there's inpatient hospitalization. This is really for those acute, short-term intensive psychiatric assessment and stabilization with a return back to the community and outpatient supports. Can we go to the next slide? In our public behavioral health system, this is youth with Medicaid. You'll see there's a significant number of services that children and youth can access. Outpatient services, which are just the same in our private system. We also have a service called care coordination. There's 3 levels, from a general level to a moderate level to an intense level. This is really that linkage to community services, making sure that people have all the entitlements they're eligible for, and they're connected to whatever services they need. We're very fortunate here in Anne Arundel County. We have a in-home intervention program. It's a grant-funded program. It provides services in the home to youth who are at risk of out-of-home placement, including hospitalization or returning from a hospital level of care. It's anywhere between a 12 and a 15-month program. We also have our Healthy Transitions program, which is a federal grant. It's a supported employment-based service for individuals ages 16 to 25. So we have some services that go past the age of 18, and this is one of them. We have a mentoring program, which generally is one of our most popular programs, also runs a bit of a waiting list. We are expanding this program starting July 1 to include younger children starting at the age of 12. And this is really provided in a group setting with a lot of supports from the individual's mentor. We do have respite, which is covered by Medicaid. It's planned overnight respite. We currently don't have crisis respite paid for by Medicaid. These are in licensed foster homes. You are not in foster care when you go into these. This is so that everybody in the family can have a break. The youngster can have a break. The parents can have a break. Siblings can have a break. You can do something fun. Our supported employment program, this is for youngsters ages 16 and up. It really is providing that job development, the job coaching, those ongoing supports. We ultimately want people to be able to seek employment in whatever field that they are interested in. And then we have more of our higher end service, which is residential treatment. This really is long-term residential care. This requires significant medical necessity criteria, and there must be some educational funding. This is a service we don't put children in without a lot of care and consideration and having exhausted the community resources available to them. Psychiatric rehabilitation programs, these are offered after school hours. They're both on and off-site. On-site means that they're actually in a program, and then off-site means that they're doing things in the community to really develop and enhance some skills for independent living, for social skills. Psychiatric day hospitals are an intense, just like it says, it is in a hospital setting, but it is only during the daytime. It provides a lot of clinical and diagnostic services for youngsters ages 13 and up. And this can be used also for youngsters transitioning out of a hospital or to prevent a hospitalization. Inpatient psychiatric hospitalization is the same as it is on the private insurance side. It's that short-term acute intensive assessment and stabilization. The 1915I, it's a very funny name, but it actually provides a number of services. This is a state plan amendment to Medicaid. Medicaid allows these services to occur and be reimbursed in our system. It does provide that in-home support that we talked about earlier, but it also provides a couple of other services, including family and peer support. So the peer support is really for the parent. This is another parent who has a youngster with mental illness and has kind of walked a mile in those shoes. They're there to support you. We also have respite. That is, again, planned respite. And then there's some flexible funds available in that program. Then there's TCM Plus, which is Targeted Case Management Plus. Unfortunately, this is a very limited program. It's 300 youth statewide, 250 youth that have medical assistance, and 50 youth that have private insurance. So we are able to get some youngsters with private insurance into this Medicaid funded service. Your private insurance doesn't cover this, but Medicaid will. And in this program, youth are getting care coordination, that family support, and then also that flexible funding.
So what you're looking at here is kind of the mental health system as a whole. And I just wanted to take a moment as crisis response to kind of understand how, when someone is in crisis or when someone's in need of resources, kind of how it works from the inside out to those resources. And so in the center is what Catherine was kind of talking about earlier, is the no wrong door, that there's a way into this through different helping programs, and one of them being our crisis response warm line, which is 24/7. Someone can call in need of assistance, and no matter what it is, they can get linked to those services. That first outer ring are kind of the things that we as crisis response, as mobile crisis intervention team, things we'll talk about a little later, or calling in, we can get you linked to immediately, no matter what time of the day it is. And as you can see, it's our hospital program, our jail program, our mobile crisis team, transportation, urgent care appointments. A lot of times we see families struggling to get in for their mental health treatment. But what's really nice is once there's that connection and we're working together, and an individual has moved to working with one of those pieces, the goal is to alleviate that crisis and return to that pre-crisis level, whatever the situation is. And that's where you see that next ring. It's linking people to the appropriate resources. As Catherine was saying, some people might need outpatient mental health. Our warm line might be able to do that right there on the phone, connecting you to an appointment in a quick amount of time. If someone is in need of another type of crisis like substance use, we might be linking them to a substance use provider. We're kind of that connection to that next line of treatment that is needed. Just kind of that warm handoff for people for whatever that might be. And then when you look at the community supports, those are the programs that, one, we work with on a day-to-day basis. And Ryan talked a lot about partnerships early on. That's a really important part of this. As you'll notice on that outer ring, we're so lucky in Anne Arundel County, because while we're connecting to the resources that you might need, we're working with all of those agencies in the community to offer support. Whether it's churches are huge in our county and offering support, shelters, hospitals, peer support. We have really grown our peer support in Anne Arundel County, both on the mental health side and on the substance use side. So this is kind of a diagram showing all of the inner workings of someone who may need to be linked to treatment. Again, not everybody's in crisis, but they still might need to call in to be linked. And it shows just kind of how the community supports, the routine care, and the crisis system kind of all work together. I guess that's me too. Okay. So again, like I said, our crisis system is 24/7, 365 days a year. We have a large system. We're really blessed. And I know I keep saying that, but I was just on the phone with another county today, calling again, saying, how do we get a program up and running? And so the first thing I always tell people is you have to have everybody working together. And what you see here is our crisis system composes of that warm line that's 24/7. Our crisis intervention team, which is Steve and I who are sitting here today. Steve is an Anne Arundel County police officer in a soft uniform who specializes in behavioral health. So we have pairs where a clinician is paired with that officer for some teams. We have mobile crisis, which is 2 clinicians. I said the other day to a family member when I was talking to them, we're pretty much therapy on wheels. We're coming out to you until you can get connected to that ongoing therapy you need. So it's 2 clinicians coming out and connecting. We have the Safe Station program, which is for our substance use. It was developed during the heroin epidemic, but really has become the no wrong door for any substance use that someone needs linkage to treatment. And that is through fire stations and police stations, because someone can present at any station 24/7 and a mobile team or a Safe Station team will come out to link them to treatment. One of the really unique things we have is everyone who is struggling that has met with one of our teams and is needing linkage to benefits can get a crisis case manager. And that's one of the real keys here that I sometimes think families need the most. It's that connection. The child might be the one having the problem at school, but the parent is the one that needs the resources. And our case management is the one that goes out and really connects those dots and then helps report back to the school what's going on. And they work really closely with our PPWs in the school system. And then just real quickly, we have hospital diversion. We have clinicians in our hospitals when people present at the EDs or emergency rooms for mental health. Jail diversion for family members or loved ones who are in jail who are struggling with mental health. We try to help make that connection. And then again, we have transportation. We help people get to their mental health appointments. So I know I keep saying this, but it is really something where in order to combat mental health and substance use in our county, we all have to work together. And while we are that initial call, a lot of times for many agencies, it's all the agencies you see in that outer ring working with us that allow us to be successful in linking. And I think one of the keys is noticing that it's every department in our county system that really works with us.
So our wonderful mental health task force had a lot of recommendations that we'll be working on, but where we'd like to start is by communicating all the school-based and community mental health supports that are available to students in Anne Arundel County, including our county's warm line, which is 410-768-5522, and the crisis text line, which is 741-741. We also plan to implement some training programs, providing mental health training, awareness, trauma resilience training to students, staff, and parents and guardians.
We also, as one of the recommendations was around supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion training. And so at Anne Arundel County Public Schools, we've been conducting anti-racism and anti-bias training for staff. I know that other county agencies are working on and implementing diversity, inclusion, and equity training. We also are, one of the recommendations too was to continue to increase school-based student services staff, which our board has recommended additional student services staff for the budget for FY22, and also continuing to build and increase crisis intervention teams, especially those who work with the schools and with children. So these are some of the areas that we're working on in terms of those next steps of the mental health task force. And Adrienne and I continue to work with members of the other task forces to make sure that we are connecting and collaborating around all these initiatives. So at this time, I will put it back to Mrs. Jackson.
Thank you so much to the entire team. As was reiterated several times, we have many agencies that are working with each other to help our community with their mental health. And as such, we have two of our community members here today, Ms. Wilson and Mr. Polanco, as community representatives. So I'd like to ask them our next question, and I would ask Ms. Gray to add anything additional to their answer from your perspective. So from the community perspective, what What mental health and community resources are available in Anne Arundel County that may not have been mentioned in the earlier presentation?
Hi, Mazetta Wilson here. So there are a number of different community organizations that work around the county. My organization, the partnership being one of them that helps connect people. But then we also have organizations and that actually do some of this work with the people you spoke to today. So Arundel Lodge is one of the big ones that's in this county that does work across mental health, the mental health spectrum. So there's a lot of things, but also I think that we have to start to think about our churches and other kind of non-conventional spaces where you're talking to people and people you are already engaged with who may be connected. And so some of the things that we can do in addition to calling those warm lines, because you can call the warm line and they'll tell you who has space and who's available and all that stuff. But you might not be ready to call a warm line, but you might be okay with talking to a counselor or someone in your neighborhood, right? And so it's the first step, I think, for anybody is really just who do you feel comfortable talking to and having that conversation? Because everybody's not going to be ready to text a line. Everybody's not going to be ready to necessarily talk to a professional, but they may be ready to start gathering information. And so just letting somebody know you need help, I think is the very first step. Or if you think that you could benefit from it, there's lots of resources in this county. And if you just let somebody know that you need help, you're going to find one of those doors that the sergeant was talking about earlier.
This is Sergio Polanco here from the county office, and actually it was a great presentation, but based on the question that you have around the county, it's a lot of resource that is also available for the community. But from our perspective, in my side, dealing with immigrant communities, it's also a huge need out there, especially when we are talking about bilingual material, a bilingual resource for them is a challenge day by day. From the family side, Hispanic families, for example, immigrants, it's hard for them to identify if they're dealing with this type of problem. It's not easy to identify because they don't know too much about it. They don't read too much about this type of topics. So many of them, they think that is a normal attitude until they find out something different. So lack of resource is one of the things that we need to keep working on it and sharing that. But at the other side, also, it's a great organization that we always work from my side. The way I refer these cases to partnership and families is it's a lot of resources that they can find for them. But for those who don't speak English, we have Centro de Ayuda. Centro de Ayuda is a nonprofit organization dealing in the Annapolis area, serving the community for many years. And actually, they have Fridays, they offering a therapist. They have a lady they come to talk with these for people who they already identified these cases. Or many of them, they just walk through the Centro de Ayuda and explain to the caseworkers what the problems what they are dealing with. And they find out that this is good for them to have an appointment. And they have a huge list. They have a waiting list for Fridays when Mrs. Maria Felix is a therapist that she comes and talk to them for an hour and talk to them and help a little bit and give some other resources available. But we need more of this resource around to help this immigrant community. And we always open to, different opportunities and try to find out what materials that we can share with them. To the schools, we have a wonderful partnership with the bilingual facilitators that does the first step when immigrant mother come in our country and our culture. When something happened with our kids, and this is a single mother talking, maybe she say that she don't know anybody else, but she goes with the teacher and say, "Hey, Mrs., I have this problem with my kids. I have this problem with this issue in my family." So Here, the bilingual facilitator, that's the first point of contact for many of these families. Then they come with us and say, Sergio, I have this family, can you please help us out or give us some point? So it's a great connection. So we have many leaders out there, and the AACP is doing a wonderful job, to different topics of this. But also, as I mentioned, we still dealing with the communication key, and we need to keep working as now to connecting these dots and see what other nonprofits they can help us. One, so many case workers, they can be bilingual to help the other families around. So this is what I have to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to reiterate what one of the things that you said. I know that we frequently use the phrase, it takes a village, and I know many find that cliche, but in this case, when we're talking about mental health, it's really an entire village. And so the purpose of this evening is not just to speak to our students and their families and our community if they were to have an occurrence that they would have to reach out about their own personal mental health. But if someone in their village reaches out to them about an issue that they're having with mental health, they now have a toolbox of resources and many people who will have your contact information on our website who can help them. So again, thank you so much for that. Ms. Gray, did you want to add anything to that before we go on to our next question?
The only thing I wanted to add was we do have a web-based resource directory called Network of Care. So for folks who aren't ready to make a phone call or aren't ready to do the text line, you can go on Network of Care, click Anne Arundel County, and you can select whether it's a substance use resource or a mental health resource. The web page is hand translated into something like 50 different languages. And there's also resources, articles that can help explain what some of our mental health disorders are in like non-psychiatric terms and just regular people terms.
Thank you so much. The next question will be for Mr. Vogelin and the Corbin Thomas team. How can someone who is feeling depressed or anxious, but who has trouble voicing emotions, tell a loved one how they are feeling?
I can start that. I think when, someone is feeling depressed or anxious, and, that obviously can be a tough time in terms of communication and expressing your emotions or feelings. And it's tough to reach out to someone. My advice would be to reach out to someone in the way that is most comfortable for you. Sometimes that can be writing. Sometimes that can be telling a friend who can then reach out to a loved one. Sometimes that could be texting a crisis text line. But I think, as hard as it is, I think it's really important to take that step to reach out to someone, because what can happen is if you don't reach out and get that help, you can those irrational feelings that you may be having or those really depressed feelings could get worse. And when you reach out for help and support, someone can help you get the support that you need to get out of that and get the treatment and the help that you need. So I just think it's important to communicate in whatever way is comfortable for you.
So I think also, and I'm going to steal this from Jen, that she says it all the time, that when something good happens in your life and there's 3 people that you're going to call and say, hey, this happened, you should be able to reach out to those same 3 people when you need help. Another thing is also for us as the person that they're reaching out to not try to fix the problem, but to be there to listen. And I can tell you as a dad, as a husband, maybe as a male in general, that there's an issue that we try to fix things instead of being there and being listeners and listening to what people say. And a lot of times that's all they need is someone to listen to them, understand what they're saying, validate their concerns, and have understanding for their concern.
Yeah, and just to kind of build off that with what he's saying about, someone you would share good news with. When we talk to kids or we even talk to adults, a lot of times it's not their family, but it's another adult. And so, but just making sure that in that circle of people that you're comfortable sharing good news with, that same group that you're going to go back to if you need help, that at least one of them is adult. That's what I tell kids all the time, is you can have two of them be friends or be youth, but we need one of them to be an adult so that that adult can get you help if you need it. I think sometimes we weigh a lot of pressure onto the parents, and I know we're focusing on parents, but sometimes we just need to make sure everyone has an outlet to reach out and say that they need help. And sometimes that is through your youth group. Sometimes that's through a team sport. Sometimes that's through just a teacher at school, whatever that piece is, making sure that that individual is able to talk to someone. Another thing, it might sound crazy, but kids sometimes don't want to be seen talking to their parents. So I speak a lot with kids about code words. When you're not okay, there might be a symbol that you want to send to your parents that kind of breaks that ability for your parent to have the conversation. We also use that when you're not in a safe situation, but sometimes even in mental health crisis, kids are so down, they might not be able to talk. Sometimes starting with that, you know, we have to meet kids where they are, and sometimes that's electronically, then to come in and have that human connection. So that's another way that I sometimes talk to kids about expressing if they're not feeling okay, is to kind of have those code words or those abilities to express themselves in other ways.
Thank you so much. I would like to take this opportunity to sort of springboard off of some of the things that you all have said. And you mentioned needing the support of an adult. So if I'm a student or a youth, how can I tell the difference between needing the support of a friend, or when is that time that I need to reach out to an adult? And I'm going to start with Mr. Vogelin and Ms. Michler, but then I'm going to actually open this one up to the rest of the panel to speak from your level of expertise, if you do so choose.
Sure, well, I'll start. I mean, first of all, being there for your friend and noticing when something seems wrong. I mean, it's normal to get upset, but also being aware of some of the signs of emotional distress, such as drastic changes in behavior, risk-taking, changes in appetite, not wanting to engage in social activities. And if you notice that your friend is experiencing something that doesn't seem right, talk to them and ask them if they're okay or if there's something you can do to help. But if it persists and the distress seems to intensify, then that's when you want to reach out to a trusted adult, a teacher, a coach, a faith leader, someone who you're confident can provide some additional support. And the one thing we're really looking for is that early intervention.
And I would add to that, I think if it feels like something that you need to tell an adult, then you should tell. I think we should err on the side of telling an adult. If someone, especially, and if someone shares something with you that they are talking about, suicide or they're talking about self-harm, you absolutely have to share that with an adult. And I think what the difficult part, as you know, as kids, and you know, someone has reached out to you and given you their trust in terms of sharing some important information. So I think it's important to have that conversation with that person back and say, I'm not, I'm going to have to tell another adult because I care about you and I want you to be safe. And I know that you've come to me and you've told me not to tell an adult, but as your friend, I have to do that because an adult is who needs to help us right now. And I know that can be a difficult conversation, but it's an important conversation. And I think it's always good to err on the side of reaching out to an adult for help if it feels like something that you can't, you're having trouble handling or supporting your friend with. And then I think also another option is if they're not ready to tell, a parent right then, help them to call the warm line or sit with them and say, let's call the warm line together, or let's text the crisis text line together. And then that will help get them to the initial part of support with crisis and then connect them with a loved one. But I just think always err on the side of supporting that friend.
I would like the rest of our panel to have the opportunity to add to the statements that were just made in reference to that. but focus a little bit on, if you're a student, how can you communicate with adults that are struggling? Mr. Vogelin and Mr. Vogelin and Ms. Michler mentioned that we should communicate with adults. Well, how do you do that? And if Mr. Paleska and then Ms. Corbin and Mr. Thomas could begin with that, and then if our panel could comment again in alignment with how they view mental health.
Sure. So like Mr. Vogelin said, it's always should be your number one priority to reach out to somebody, even if it's someone that you may not be necessarily comfortable with. I mean, obviously you'd want to reach out to someone you're comfortable with, but if necessary, reach out to anyone in the school system. I know at ACPS is willing and able to help. And the one thing I'd consider as a student is, you want to make sure you find a trusted adult. When I was in elementary school at Herman Harmon Elementary School, go Hawks, we had these things called treasure hunters, and we were a Kids at Hope school. Our treasure hunters were there to basically, was kind of like a designated staff member to kind of help us to find our way. Like, we could go to them with any questions, we could combine them. So I encourage everyone who is watching, any student who is watching, to please find your treasure hunter, because that treasure hunter will ultimately help you in the long run, no matter what. They will be there for you, they will protect you, you are loved by them. So find someone to be that for you. You might not find them tomorrow, but you will definitely find them at some point in your academic career. I promise you that. I promise.
Something also I think it's a key in the communication between the students and identifying all these types of signs is through the tutoring programs, when it is a person who can work with the kids and having these type of programs to offering then as a volunteers, some leaders in the community stop by at the schools and connect with these kids lunchtime and see how we can interact with them and learn more about it, and connect them through our job to see this and listen, this is what I do every day, and this is how my job impacts the communities. And maybe I can give something to do just as a connection to, through what we are dealing and helping them and open their minds, because many of these situations, they come with kids that the people who they don't have anybody in home to talk to with, they don't have any friends around, or maybe they're shy for X or Y reason. So they need someone to talk, but it's hard for them to accept that I need a friend. We have to be there for them. So creating or supporting this tutoring program for kids, for students, we can identify leaders in the community to spend half hour, 2 hours a week in different times in schools and Zoom or anything. Interacting with them is a key, but especially because here at the screen right now, we have a group of leaders that every one of us change lives out there. And we got the ability to talk with someone at the same level and understand what the challenges are facing day by day, especially kids and teenagers. Parents maybe getting divorced and single mother or single father or things like that, that is really hard for them to dealing with that situation at a certain point. So we are here for them, and I'm appreciate this opportunity to learn from everyone, but also we like them learn from us and understand that we are here for them.
Ms. Corbin and Mr. Thomas?
So I think I kind of want to build off, I might be jumping ahead, but I really want to talk about when we're looking at this, it's really tough right now with where we are with COVID and really being able to know if someone's okay. We get a lot of calls in for concern because of, the texting back and forth or the Zooming and the seeing kids or not, but not being able to necessarily check in. So I think one of the difficult things we're dealing with right now is the struggles of really human connection and being able to see if people are okay. So making sure that if I want kids to be able to at least talk to their parents, and then the parent can make the connection for their friend. That's one of the things we talk about. If you're, FaceTiming with someone or you're seeing something posted, if you're not comfortable talking to your friend about it at that point, go to your parent or go to someone. Again, it's just like Steve and I were saying, so that that other adult can maybe make sure that person's okay. Sometimes things are misconstrued, and sometimes what they appear in a text might not be how they're necessarily feeling. It could have been the way they felt at that moment. I think one of the other big issues that we kind of need to look at is that the stress that kids are under right now, and being supportive of that, and really telling kids it's okay to not be okay, for one, and then telling them that they're resilient. I feel like we don't focus enough on telling kids that though today is tough, tomorrow is going to be better. And I think that having some of that, making sure that kids know that they can be that positive influence back on their friends and say, I know you're having a tough day today, but tomorrow may be a lot better. And if it's not, we're still going to be here for you. So letting them have that emotion and feel it, but then also encouraging kids to be resilient. I think that we need to make sure that we're instilling that in our youth.
So, and just to add, knowing that none of us are perfect and that you don't have to be perfect, that it's acceptable to give it your best shot. And just if you're working hard, doing the right thing, that's the most important thing.
Thank you. I'm going to pause. Anyone else from our panel wanted to talk about that before we move on to our next question?
The only thing I think I could add, because I think that everybody gave really great feedback, is just also understanding that if there's somebody who you already talk to, or some adults or older sibling that you already talk to, if you think that you are maybe feeling a little different, just go to them and tell them. Sometimes you don't know if there's something wrong, and sometimes you may feel like it's something wrong, and it may not be as bad as it feels. And so if you just talk to people who are older and who know what to look for, you'll be able to get the support you need.
I go back to what Jen and Steve said earlier with your three people. If you have three people in your life that you're sharing all your good stuff with, those are also going to be your three people that you can share the tough stuff with. We don't have to do this alone. Our parents are struggling, grandparents are struggling, kids are struggling. We are literally in this together. We are all trying to figure this out. We are all trying to manage. It's not easy, but we can all support each other.
Thank you all very much. So I want to springboard off of what Ms. Corbin spoke about. She spoke about the importance of checking in and really supporting our youth and being able to advocate for themselves. So Mr. Pileska and Mr. Vogelin, how can mental health be prioritized without sacrificing your grades, your education, and even your extracurricular activities?
So that is a really good question, because this kind of hits home for me as a student, a high school student, a student being in AP classes, a student being in honors classes, a student who kind of juggles their extracurriculars while trying to stay focused on themselves, while trying to rebuild themselves, trying to find myself. So one thing I definitely want to emphasize is make sure you're connected with your counselor. Find out who your counselor is and try to build a relationship with them. My counselor, she is amazing. Shout out to Miss Cooper over at Mead High School. We have such a great relationship, and it's something that's really helped me throughout this process. Like, she talks with me about my schedule. We already have my senior year already planned out when I'm as a junior, and we're definitely we work in sync, and that's what I feel like is the most important. And then definitely just making sure, if you're a big studier, if you are a person who loves to like stay up all night pulling all-nighter studying, it's not worth it. I promise you. As much as those grades, as much as you love those grades, you don't need to stay up all night studying. You make sure you take a break, because number one, put yourself first, sleep first. You need that sleep to wake up in the morning and strength. There's all types of study habits that teachers recommend, and I can guarantee you that I have not heard one teacher that said you need to stay up all night and study. And then third is, you don't need to take every hard class that's offered towards you. Find a class that you are passionate about so it doesn't devolve on your mental health. Like, you don't need to take every AP class that's offered at you. You don't need to take every honors class. If you're not an honors, if you don't feel like you're at an honors level, there's no shame in taking a standard level class. If you don't feel like you're an AP student, there's no shame in taking an honors class, not at all. And if you're really passionate about a subject, I encourage you to take that subject in a more honors or AP course. So for example, if you are passionate about statistics and math and analysis, take AP statistics your junior or senior year. If you are really interested in the Roman Empire and European history, take AP European history. It's a very definitely a nuanced conversation overall, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. But I want students out there to know that you need to put yourself first. You need to make yourself first. You need to make sure you are doing self-care routines, doing all types of just kind of study breaks, strategies, breathe, take a breath. It's all going to be okay in the long run. I promise you that.
Justin, that was an excellent answer. I cannot add much more to that, so I will just reiterate a couple of your points. I just think that your perspective on education and mental health is what you just described is to me the model of how we should approach it. Being a teenager and being an adolescent is a difficult time, and it was a difficult time when I was there, and it is a much more difficult time now with social media and just things moving so fast. So I think what you mentioned was just having a balance, being able to balance all the priorities in your life, with mental health being the most important, because if you can't accomplish the things you want to accomplish and be successful if you aren't taking care of yourself, taking care of your mental health. You mentioned strategies. It's important to know, what are your go-to things that around self-care? Do you like to exercise? Do you like to meditate? Do you like to just take walks? What do you like to do to make sure that you are balanced, taking care of yourself? I think another thing you mentioned was just, it's okay. You don't have to put all that pressure on yourself. It's okay to talk to your counselor and say, I can't, my course load is too difficult right now. I need to talk about what things are going to look like right now. How can I change that? That is absolutely okay. As Jen and Steve say, it's okay not to be perfect. We aren't perfect beings, and when it comes to balancing things in your life and balancing mental health, we have to give ourselves a break and cut ourselves some slack. So I would say if you're a student who's struggling with this, and I would say reach out to Justin, because he has some great advice.
Thank you all very much. This next question is for Ms. Wilson. So one of the things that our Teen Mental Health Advisory has told us has been difficult when we focus on this whole concept of breaking the stigma. That's something that many of our students, as well as our community members, struggle with. Mm-hmm. So what impact, Ms. Wilson, do you believe that culture has when it comes to discussing mental health challenges and accessing resources?
I think in my community, and I identify very closely with the African-American community, it's the only one I really know. I think by and large, we usually use religion for that. So people will say, oh, I don't want to go to a therapist, but they will talk to a pastor. And I think sometimes that has to be okay too, right? So you have to talk to somebody. And if your pastor's the one you trust, talk to them. You may not feel comfortable going to somebody who's a licensed therapist or somebody who identifies as a psychiatrist, but your pastor, in many cases, those folks have similar human and science backgrounds, right? And then they also know what to look for, right? So they know when they're in over their head and can help you get to that next step, which is the key, right? We want you to be safe. And I think the stigma, I mean, it exists, and we all have to do our work to like all things that are antiquated and don't serve us well, right? That it doesn't serve us to say, I'm not going to get help, right? Nobody needs to be that strong. I think there's strength in getting help. And I'm always telling people, like, go to a therapist. I tell everybody to go to a therapist because I think everybody could benefit from it. I think even if you're not struggling, it helps you, especially if you're somebody who wasn't given the tools young, it helps you learn those tools so that when struggle comes, you know how to handle it. And sometimes being prepared is I always think being prepared is just as good, if not better, than waiting till a crisis happens. So if you're an adult and you haven't seen a therapist, look into it. It might be useful for you, right? And even if it's not, it won't hurt. It won't hurt to talk to somebody who doesn't know you, who can give you some sound advice. And if you're a kid, use those 3 people in your life and just be honest about where you are, right? Because you have a long way to go. And nobody expects you to know exactly what you're doing. I think especially in times like now when we're in COVID, we see that there's so little that we control. And it's important for us to remember that the things that we can control, our mental health, how we feel about our bodies, how we feel about ourselves, those are things we can get help with. If you're spiraling or you feel like you don't have control, you can get help. There's things that you can do, whether it's talking to somebody or reaching out and using the hotlines that Adrienne talked about earlier. Takes a couple minutes of your time, and you may find like, hey, you know what, I feel better after it, I want to go back. Or you may find like, hey, I feel better, but I don't need to do it right now. Those are very personal decisions, and I think you should take them seriously for yourself. But I do think that in our community, we do need to look at it as something that is just like, if you have a toothache, you don't avoid the dentist, right? So if your mind is not feeling clear and you feel like you're not at peace, get help. You go to a dentist for a toothache, you go to a therapist for if you're struggling. And all of it's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Blanco, is there something that you would like to add in reference to that question, sir?
I'm exactly agree with what Mrs. Wilson say, especially to the immigrant community. I spoke from them. The church means a lot for them. Having a conversation with her pastor, going to the church and identify themselves with what exactly they are having. In Anne Arundel County has a lot of churches, a lot of pastors, they're leaders that always in the community, they always dealing with that, especially during this pandemic. They're always in contact with us and they're always looking for help these families. But at the same time, they always having these type of cases that sometimes the family is coming with the kids or with the mother, with the father, someone, an adult or teenager. They're always dealing with this situation, and they find in a church, and we find in a church a good partner. So I'm encouraging anyone to connect with the pastors and share with them all the information that we have available for them to share with their families and the time when they needed to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've spent a lot of time this evening talking about prevention. Unfortunately, there are some students who may know someone who is thinking about attempting suicide. Ms. Corbin and Mr. Thomas, what can those students or our community members who may be listening, what could they do? What are some steps that you may suggest for someone who may know someone who is thinking about attempting suicide?
So the first and foremost is we have to make sure they're safe. So if that person, if it's is in the fact that you believe it's that time they are unsafe, the most important thing to do is call 911 and give as much information as you have for that person. Now, if you're with the person, you want to stay with them. Now, if it's not something, and what we look at is if someone has a plan and if they have the means to carry out the plan. And if it's not that imminent where it's a were an immediate concern at that moment, we really want people to call into the warm line. And then we can come out and it'll be an officer dressed like I am, a clinician like Jen, coming out as a team to assist the person and their family. Now, if they're not with them and it's a text message, or if it's something on social media, it's really important they call that in as well. It can be pretty devastating to someone if they're crying out for help and no one responds to that cry out for help. So we want to go in first and make sure they're safe. And an earlier discussion was there about a child may be afraid that they're going to alienate their friend who's calling out for help. I'll never forget, Jen and I were teaching in a classroom setting one time to a mental health club in a school system, and a young lady was put in that situation. And she told us, she said, you know, at that moment, my friend was upset at me, but they knew I cared and they appreciate that I got them help because they're still with us today.
Yeah, I think it's just important to make sure our youth understand that we need to make sure the person's okay, and that you have to tell someone. A lot of times I tell kids all the time, if it's put out there, like Steve said, they're asking for help. If there is something posted or something put out there, that is their cry out for help. They want someone to reach out. And so we need to make sure that happens for them. I kind of want to go back to what Ms. Wilson said. Not everybody wants therapy. Not everybody wants to call the warm line. That's why I want to make sure we have other resources. Some people, we get calls right now. Some people don't want police there. What do we do when a family is struggling, needing help? And so we need to make sure that people understand they can take their child to the emergency room themselves. They can walk them in there and say, my kid is a danger. I can't keep them safe. Please help me. There are ways that people can go about this where you don't always have to call 911. Or if you're not comfortable with that situation right now, then there are other options. And one of those is that a parent can take their child to the ER themselves and present. There are walk-in clinics during the day. Shepherd Pratt has one. There are places that we can send individuals that if they don't want to go to an ED, that they can reach out and get an appointment or get assessed right then and there. So I just want to, for people who are unsure that they want to dial 911, which we get a lot of calls lately regarding that, is we have to make sure there's other options. And those other options are, you do have the emergency room. There is some walk-in mental health clinics. Like I said, Shepherd Pratt has one during the day. Doesn't help sometimes in the evening, but there are other options.
Thank you. So in a few minutes, we're going to end our formal conversation this evening. So when we leave here this evening, how can we take what we have learned during this event and use it to start conversations and educate others in our community about mental health? And I'm going to ask Mr. Polanco and Ms. Corbin and Mr. Thomas and Ms. Wilson, but if Ms. Michler or Ms. Gray or Mr. Vogelin or Mr. Poliska would like to chime in, that would be very, very helpful as well.
For me, the one thing from tonight that I want to make sure is the resources. Make sure in your phone, I always talk to you to make sure that there are numbers in there that people can connect and get help. I always talk about the student IDs, have a lot of great resources on them, a lot of great numbers that they can call to talk to someone. I think also making sure, like we said, if you've picked 3 people, that you have their number in there and that you know how to connect with them in several different ways. I always tell kids when we used to talk, but when school was in session, we went out there, put the warm line number in your phone, and then go home and show your parents that the warm line number is in your phone, and then tell them to put that number in there and label it whatever you need so that you know you can get help. I think sitting down too and just talking to your child about what happens if your friend's not okay? What would you do? Like putting that situation out there and just having a conversation, because you might be surprised. They might have more skills than you think. They might come up with something that none of us as adults have thought about. And so just sitting down and putting that situation out there and seeing what their coping skills are and what they would do in that situation.
So I think it's making sure, especially children, that they understand that there's always hope, there's help, and that they have worth. It's every child has to recognize that tomorrow is a new day, and today might be a really difficult day, but there are people that really care and will be there to help them with the new day tomorrow, build on hope, and let them know their worth. Everyone has a ton of worth, and sometimes people don't see it in themselves, and we have to show them their worth. But that is the key for me, is those three principles.
From my side, I learned a lot. I learned about what everyone's supposed doing to help our communities, even if we meet in different chats and different rooms and different meetings every week sometimes. We always have something to share, and we always have good things to share. But if we take advantage of what we got in mind and what we have in your hands, everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a social media, everybody have access to what these kids have access to. So let's share the good things that we learned today, and also let's share the hope to those who they still in need. Maybe they don't want to talk, maybe they don't want to say anything about it, but they find a picture, or they find a text, or they find something that we can share and use the social media as a platform to connect with them. Because I'm very sure they use the social media. If they use social media and something else, they can find in social media a short video, 30-second video, or 1-minute video, and some kind of post that from all departments they already have. That material is already there. Let's share it. Maybe having a Google Drive doc, and everybody can go there and put some stuff, and we can get from there. Just one picture a day, one picture every 2 days to this network. I'm a manager for different community groups in Anne Arundel County. So they give me an admin to connect with these groups. So since I do my activities around what I do every day, yes, I can share a picture, I can share a message to them, but let's be consistent to find out how many people they can be impacted through the changes that we like to have with them through this social media. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to respond about what we can do moving forward? Ms. Gray?
So a couple of things I'd like to add. One is stress the importance of talking openly about mental health, educate yourself and others about mental health issues. Also be conscious of the language you use around mental health. The illness doesn't define who the person is. It's part of their experience, but not who they are. And then encouraging that equity between physical health and mental health. If we have a cut on our arm, we don't just say, oh, shucks, I hope it stops bleeding soon. No, we go and get it taken care of. But if we're experiencing some sort of mental distress, we need to have that same equity. We go and get it taken care of. And then finally, just showing that compassion for folks who are struggling with a mental illness. Each of us can make a difference in somebody who needs that support from us.
Mr. Pleska?
So definitely just emphasizing what Ms. Grace said, we need to make sure we're showing compassion to anyone who is struggling right now, making sure that, you're not judging them in any way, you're listening, you are openly gathering as much information as you can so that you can help whoever is in struggle or who is in need of any attention or any just love. Just my message is to spread love to as much people as you can. You need to make sure that you are aware of what you're saying to people, because you never know what's going on inside anyone's head, or you don't know what's going on inside anyone's life. So my message would be just to spread love to as much people as you can and break the stigma of that mental health is bad. Talking about your mental health is bad. That is not the case at all. We just need to set the scenario that mental health needs to, in fact, be talked about all the time. It needs to be a conversation in our everyday society. Like if I were to walk up to someone, like some random people, how's your mental health? That you look at me crazy. But we need to start doing that. We need, not exactly in those words, but we need to start checking in on people more, in on people who you haven't heard from in a long time, that long lost buddy from California or New York, wherever they may be. Just check up on them and tell them that you love them. Tell them that you are there for them. Tell them that you are ready to listen whenever, if need be.
Ms. Wilson and then Mr. Vogler.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is also just as a friend of someone and as a person, just understand that, if somebody's talking to you, listen to what they're saying. Because sometimes when people are talking to us, we're multitasking. But if you just gave somebody your undivided attention, you might hear something and one of your friends might be in need of help. So make sure you listen when your friends are talking. And if someone asks you how you're doing, tell them.
I was going to give a piece of student advice, just a practical thing you could do at your school that I've seen some high schools do this is, see if there's a sponsor that, you could start a mental health club at your school, where you can start the conversation with students at your school and start initiatives at your school where you're having these conversations about mental health and you're breaking that stigma with your friends. I mean, I think that's just a practical thing that you can start from a grassroots effort as a student.
Thank you. And our final question is going to be for the entire panel this evening. If you could briefly, in a minute or less, we talked a lot about encouragement tonight. So what words of encouragement do you have for families who have experienced perhaps the death of a loved one, loss of employment, food insecurity, lack of in-person social interactions? Perhaps they're struggling with non-COVID related issues such as social justice or many of the other myriad of issues that come up on a daily basis. So please offer some words of encouragement. We'll begin with Ms. Wilson and then we'll just go down the line.
Okay. I think as we're kind of thinking about it, the biggest takeaway is that there's help, right? Anne Arundel County is a large county and there are people here to support you, but you have family, you have friends. There's someone who is there and available to help you, who knows where the resources are, and don't be afraid to use them. Like, we are all kind of going through this experience of life together, and we're all figuring it out and trying to be the best that we can. And so if you're struggling, or if you think that, you're looking around and thinking, okay, maybe this is not going the way you want it to, or things aren't happening the way you planned, just understand that no one knew COVID was going to happen. And it was one of those times where we just all had to take a step back and try to figure out what our next moves are. And many of us have suffered loss of loved ones and all those things, but there's help. There's grief counseling, there's supports around getting back on your feet. There's food pantries in this county. There's clothing pantries in this county that are open despite COVID, that have resources that are ready and willing to help. So reach out and ask for help, and someone in this county is waiting to help you.
I can say, be with them, stay with them, and connect with them. So if we hear a family who is dealing with a really hard situation, just take a couple minutes to talk to them and call and daily basis, say, you know what, I will check with you tomorrow. Everything is fine. Can I stop by there? Can we talk? I understand the virus, they makes a lot of things really difficult to communicate, but the communication for us is the key to those who do we know that they are having a hard situation. So offering a couple minutes from you to talk to them or from us and keep this communication. It's not just I will call them and then next 10 days I will call you back. No, just try to be in touch. As someone mentioned, that it's a lot of resources at the county. Maybe they need food, maybe they need pampers for kids, maybe they need something around. So we really want to be there for them. And all we need is just be in touch with them. Little by little, we will break the ice that they feel that they are not communicating with us, but communication is a key. So stay with them. That will do. Thank you.
Mr. Vogelin.
My messages would be similar to what Myzetta said and Sergio, is just remain hopeful, even when there doesn't seem like there may not be things to be hopeful for. When you look at your situation, remain hopeful and reach out to the people, try and stay positive. And one thing I know about Anne Arundel County is there, as Myzetta said, there are so many people who want to help and are willing to help, and there are so many amazing resources. And I know that we've mentioned a few and we'll mention some at the end, but please reach out for support, because whatever you're going through, there is someone who is willing and wants to help.
Ms. Michler and Ms. Gray.
Well, I think everyone's pretty much said it all. I mean, this is a wonderful county. I'm really blessed to be here. And the way everyone, all the departments work together to try to make sure that our efforts are coordinated, that our residents and our families, our friends, our students get everything that they need in any way that we can support them. If we don't have the answer, we work to find someone in the county who can help out. So again, I'm just grateful that we have the resources and we continue to try to make sure that our residents know that they're available and how to access them.
I would just add, be open to accepting support and be open to providing support for someone else. And you can do them at the same time.
Ms. Corbin and Mr. Thomas.
I think I'm just going to say what I've been kind of saying all night. You don't have to be perfect and you are resilient. I think we're in a tough time, but I know we talk about the negatives, but there's so many positives too. We're going to see that kids come out with resilience, that they see that there's a better day. They see that their voice is heard, that they, I think what we've been saying tonight is we're giving them the tools and we're supporting them, and they're going to see that, but at the same time, they're going to learn that they can do it. And while we always talk about COVID being negative and things that are happening, there are kids who are flourishing from it as well. There are kids that are doing well, that have slowed down and learned to be with their family, that have learned that, things about their family that they probably wouldn't learn of if they were in the hustle bustle of everyday life. Families are sitting down at dinner. Use that time to talk about these topics and other topics and just be there for each other. So I think we're going to be surprised that on the other end, I think we're all going to find that we're more resilient and that there's more family support than we thought.
And to go along with that, it's important that everyone knows that if something's bothering them, talk about it. Don't let it stay bottled up inside. Have that discussion with your safe people, whether it's your family, your 3 people you go to, your teacher, your counselor, whoever it is. But if something is eating you up inside, have that conversation and talk about what that grievance is.
And finally, Mr. Paleska.
Just want to echo what all of my esteemed panelists are saying. You are not alone whatsoever. We are a county of hundreds of people who are just willing and wanting to help you. And coming from firsthand, I know what kind of help the county can bring to you, and you are in no shape or form alone in this battle. Like I alluded to before, we are in a war right now, but guess what? the war is hopefully going to on the horizon soon. The war ending, I'm sorry, is on the horizon. And my hope for everyone is that you will find your treasure hunter, find that person who you can talk to and just be with them, be empathetic towards them, and just show love to everyone that you could possibly can.
Thank you again to our entire panel. As an employee and as a resident of Anne Arundel County, but most importantly, as a mother of school-age children, I appreciate this conversation. Our teachers, our principals, our support staff, our parents, and our students have worked hard to extend learning through making in-person instruction available. And as has been said several times this evening, we are definitely in this together. So if you're an Anne Arundel County and Public Schools staff member or an employee, please utilize our EAP services that can be found on our AACPS website if you are in need of help. To our students, our staff, and community members, you've received a lot of information this evening. And in a few seconds, we're going to place a slide that has much of the contact information. We will continue this conversation in smaller community settings in the fall when hopefully we can be in person. Our broadcast this evening is going to be archived and will be available for you to share with family and friends. As I know, even in a virtual world, we have several competing meetings. And so they'll be available for you all to share with family and friends. And again, our homepage is filled with lots and lots of resources. I would be remiss if I did not thank our amazing leader, Dr. Arlotto, for all of his support and affording me the opportunity to do this great work with my team and the rest of AACPS. He's truly a leader that understands that mental health is very, very important, not only for our students and for our community. We will continue to meet with our students on a regular basis, not just in the superintendent's advisory, but in our mental health advisory. But now that we have opened the doors for in-person instruction, we'll be able to meet with students on a regular basis in their instructional setting. So as you all know, I was a principal and I was a teacher. And so I'm going to leave you with a little homework this evening. First, I'd like for everyone to take out their cell phone, and I'd like for you to add the Anne Arundel County Warm Line as one of your contacts. Because the last thing that you want to do when someone needs help is to have to go to Google and search, or another search engine, and to search for a number. So please, in your cell phone right now, put the Warm Line number. Again, that number is 410-768-5522. Again, that phone number is 410-768-5522. I know that many of you out there utilize texting. And so remember, 741-741 is another way that you can seek help. Secondly, your second piece of homework for this evening is to check in with at least 2 other people over the next 24 hours. Someone that you may think may be struggling, and perhaps someone who doesn't appear to be struggling at all, but you want to check in with them. Maybe it's someone that, because we haven't been in person with each other for several months, maybe it's someone that you would just like to check in with. And finally, and this is the most important piece of homework, when you wake up tomorrow morning, what is it that you are going to commit to take care of yourself? With that, I thank you all for a wonderful evening. Thank you so much to our communications office, to student services, and for all of our panelists who were able to join us this evening. Again, thank you and take care of yourselves.